with DID, dissociative identity disorder. I can be found on my YouTube page, Healing with Courage, or my Etsy account, Healing with Courage. I create grounding tools to help us just stay grounded.
Perfect. So, my first question for you, Mike, is when it comes to DID, what is that and how does it impact your life?
I'm gonna take a quick second because this is always important to us. And DID is an adaptive survival system. It's the nervous system's way of creating a way for a child to process trauma in a way to where it can divide and conquer that situation. Um, and that's what I mean by sometimes healing cannot come out at once. We have to not eliminate our parts, but start to accept them, love them, have compassion for them, and walk forward with them.
I think that's a beautiful explanation because you're positioning it in a way that is not only understanding, but that can be felt from an emotional aspect with such positivity. Um, when was the first time you realized you had DID, and how did that experience go?
I think is for us it was weird because people with DID don't discover they have DID like you would a broken bone. You know, it's not something you could go to the doctor, get an X-ray or CAT scan, and be like, "Oh wait, you have DID, pinpoint it there." It was more through like time gaps experience that I couldn't explain. Reactions and emotions that were so sudden that didn't feel like it was mine. At times I was like, I was watching my life be lived for me rather than me being present and living it at the time. The one instance that I seem to connect with everybody with is a moment where I had a panic attack. I used to live like in, I used to walk around like anxiety lived in my chest. I don't know if anyone actually knows what that means, but sometimes it's just what it's right there. And I was inside of a car and I had my hands on the steering wheel. And the anxiety became so intense and I got so panic and frantic that it seemed like my world was caving in inside that car. I don't know what happened, but there was a part of me that just put some music on. It put some rock music on. And it wasn't later until I felt safe and I was able to understand what actually happened in that moment. And that was that sometimes we are so lost, stuck in that anxiety moment that it's not that we're fragmenting, but that part of us that it's okay. This is too much for you to handle right now. Let's divide and conquer part. That part of me was that anger, that strength, because something that we discovered is that sometimes anger is the only thing strong enough to get us out of that anxiety, out of that depression, out of that stuck. Anger is the only thing. It's almost like that scene out of Pulp Fiction where John Travolta drives that adrenaline shot into Uma Thurman. So if Uma Thurman was depression, anxiety, that anger is that adrenaline shot that John Travolta comes in and just so I so now that we think about that moment, we heard that rock music and that part of us took over. And that happened so suddenly within what a matter of minutes that I was able to get out of that parking lot. I don't know how I made it through that day, but we made it. We as a system made it through that day. We made it home to our sons. We were able to hug them, cherish them, and be blessed. But I think those one of the first moments that I'm like, okay, what's really going on in here? Sorry if that was too long.
No, that's perfect because remember, they're here to hear you. They're not here to hear me, right? They're focused on your journey. And we talked about journeys earlier before we started how when we look at people, we don't necessarily know their story. We know what they're presenting at that moment in time. Or if we're fortunate enough, that relationship, whether it's a friendship, romantic relationship, professional relationship, whatever title we put on it, we know what they present to us until we actually hear their story or hear their voice. And I think sometimes there could be a misunderstanding of someone because we keep our story and our journey close to our chest. Like you mentioned, that anxiety in that example, right? I know I've experienced that. I know that you share there's some things that you experience as well. When it comes to understanding DID, what are some of the misconceptions or myths that you'd like to clarify or provide a proper understanding of?
I think the biggest one would be that DID is brokenness, that DID is chaos when it's really not. DID is intelligence, DID is structure, DID is in so architectural that we forget what is really there for, and that is to protect us. That's why I call it an adaptive survival system, because depending on the situation in front of us, we're able to adapt. There's a different part of us that's able to adapt to the situation in order for us to survive. That's the biggest misconception. So it's not chaos. So what other people see as mood swings or a quick reaction to the moment, like, okay, that was a little much there. What it really is the mind's protecting that person on whatever trauma they might have had. It's like you said, sometimes we don't know someone's journey until they actually speak about. How many of us are walking around through life with the pressures, with the weight of the things that we don't share, or the things that we don't actually talk about? And I came to realize that pressure that wasn't the problem. Being unprepared for those situations, being unprepared for the moments that triggered us, that was the problem. And once we chose clarity, once we actually chose, like, okay, the idea is not broken. We adapted to each situation. How can we understand what those situations are to be better prepared when those situations next arise? That's what the idea is. Intelligence, structure, not chaos.
And I think that's a fantastic point to make because we're all coping or we're all soothing ourselves in different ways. You have some people who have DID, they have their way. Some people have ADHD and they have their way. And maybe someone has abusive parents and they have their way. One is not better than the other, it's just different. And all three and every single one out there should be respected. Like when I look at my journey, and I know sometimes there are some things in society that is like off limits, like you don't talk bad about your parents, or in some people's cases, you don't share your mental health journey because there's a sense of maybe shame and guilt. I let down my family because I have this, or I'm not good enough because I have that. But that's not necessarily the case. We have to find our value within first before we can expect others to give ourselves value. Was that something that you had to learn, was to find your value, find your role, maybe even find your place in society? And if so, how did you do it?
You know how we were talking about journeys earlier? The way I did it was discovering the entry point in my journey. And what I mean by that is I walked through life with that shame of being misdiagnosed early in life, to where shame and guilt was just built into our nervous system. So that entry point, I had to stop asking, what is wrong with us? What's wrong with me? And I had to start asking, what happened to us that made us be this way? And that question alone became such a ripple in our pond that we had to make a choice in our lives. We have two sons that are why we do this, why we do our mental exercises, why we do everything. And we have a partner who's been here for 12 years. Through challenges, we have grown, but it is through those challenges that I had to make a decision. I had to make a decision whether I chose to stay with the people I loved and loved me, but was wrecking my sanity, or that I actually had to choose ourselves and walk away and stop self abandoning themselves. And that moment alone was the hardest thing we've ever done in our lives. But that's also where our starting journey entry point began, because we were walking exhausted of life, of exhausted of just trying to hold everything inside, of trying to keep sane through the pressures of life, through the pressures, the emotions, and not being able to interpret our emotions correctly. And then I was so panicked. My body was frantic. And I ended up walking into a boxing gym. Now, I didn't go in there for looking for a fight. I didn't even go in there to be brave or courageous. I went in there because I just wanted to be seen. And Coach Mark, I don't know what it was, but he took 5 minutes out of his damn day. He didn't have to. He didn't have to. He could have walked away, could have turned me around, but no. He saw me. He took them 5 minutes, provide some grounding, like, you're okay. He let my nervous system feel safe. And once he saw that, he put his hand on my shoulder and said, Mike, the person walking out that door is stronger than the man who walked in. Every day you wake up, you're stronger than the version of you who fell asleep. That alone changed the trajectory of our lives. And we forever thank Coach Mark for that. Not everyone has a Coach Mark. I understand that. I realize that not everybody has to do with the DID. But the one thing that we all have in common is that we all wake up stronger than the version of us that fell asleep, even if we don't feel it yet.
You mentioned Coach Mark, and that's such a beautiful story. And I may actually take it one step further, Mike, and say that everyone has a Coach Mark, maybe just in a different way. Maybe they're not a coach. Maybe it's a mother, maybe it's a father, maybe it's a friend. Maybe it's that person that said, how are you doing today? And you opened up and you said, Mike Terrain, I'm not having a good day. And they looked at you and they said, why? How can I make your day better? Sometimes it's just someone showing that they care at that one moment where you maybe don't believe anyone cares about you because you don't have it inside of you. I know I went through that. There's days where I used to sit, I'm like, I don't know. I don't know about this life. I don't know if I can make it. I don't know if I'm going to be what I think I could be. And then there's a teacher that came along and they said, you can. You can do it. And I think that's why I always took English in high school and throughout my education system, because every English teacher I ever had told me in different ways to believe in yourself because they believed in me. And sometimes you ask yourself this question, how can I not believe in myself if all these other people are believing in me, right? When you shared that story about Coach Mark, how important was it for you to get that story out and to reflect on what they did for you?
In the beginning, it wasn't important at all. I was still trying to survive. um, it wasn't it became a daily habit of visiting Coach Mark. Um, that quote, it really stuck with me, and the reason why it stuck with me is because I wrote it in an index card and I put it right outside my bedroom door. So the moment I walk out, I remember the man walking out this door is stronger than the man who walked in. The reason why everything became important to us to start sharing that story was because I wish I had that a lot sooner in life. We shared earlier that we're both in our 40s. It took 42 years for me to learn how to teach myself that survival is not safety. Just because I learned to survive, just because I learned to endure what life threw at me, didn't mean my nervous system ever felt safety. It didn't mean that I learned how to process my emotions. It didn't mean I learned how to process the trauma that happened to me. And I was walking around not knowing that my body really did remember all that trauma. My body remembered all those experiences in life. Though my parts and my ulcers carried everything that we went through without me speaking about it. And it wasn't until I started to acknowledge them that I started to heal, that I started to become a better father for my boys. And that more than anything is why I started to I'm like, okay, if I'm a better father now that I'm aware, how much more better fathers can we happen? How much more better parents can there be? Because one of the strangest facts that we came across in discovering our diagnosis is that DID is the least amount of research behind a mental diagnosis. There's so little research done on DID that I think there's more of us walking out there that studies suggest. Studies suggest that there's 1% of the population walking around with DID. In the United States alone, that's 3.3 million people. That's a lot of people to be walking around with DID. And that's a lot of us that have it that are not aware that we have it. I somehow knew that I had it early in life, but going back to that shame and that guilt, I didn't know DID was a term that existed. I thought what I had was called multiple personality disorder. And when most people hear that, they get tension behind their neck or they start to get defensive because they think of that chaos. They think serial killer. They think dangerous. And that's that shame and guilt that I walked around with. I was walking around with shame and guilt for a system that was protecting me. I was walking around with shame and guilt for a system that adapted to the trauma that happened to me. And multiple personality disorder made it like that. Mm. So another reason why this is important to me is to destigmatize multiple personality disorder or DID because it's not chaos. It's not dangerous. We're not all serial killers. It's just hearts that survived a traumatic event. And we just had to learn to have compassion for those parts and realize that we're human. Like, it's okay if something happened to us. It wasn't our fault. We just got to learn to have compassion for us, stop being isolated, and reach out.
You mentioned your children and you mentioned how important it is for you to show up for them, all of you, to show up for them, together in unison, in strength. You know, children can inspire nations to come to peace. Children can inspire so many people, can do so many things. When you think of your children, What role did they play in your life back then, and what role do they continue to play in your life now?
I'm glad you put it as role back then and role now, because when I have two boys, when my eldest was born, is the first time I knew, for the first time in my life, what unconditional love meant. It's weird to say that out loud sometimes because we have two parents that are still alive, but yet when our eldest was born is the first time we felt unconditional love. And that's when, okay, now I'm not living my life for myself. I gotta make sure that I got a roof over his head, food on the table, clothes on the bed. I gotta actually be responsible for the first time in my life. Now, as they're getting older, because now I have two, I it's important to us that we're present. And one of the things that led us to start understanding what was going on in here is that we felt we knew we were being dissociated from our oldest. There was times where we will catch glimpse of him just staring at us, like what's wrong with him, and we knew we weren't present. There was moments where, like, I would come home and I got so stuck to the routine of going to work, coming home, going to work, coming home, going to work, coming home, that I neglected to actually give them attention. I wouldn't sit down and color with my boys. I wouldn't get a basketball and go play outside with my boys. And I knew it was because I was neglecting my parts, that I didn't want to deal with them. I got so used to stuffing all the emotions and stuff, everything inside. I didn't realize that I was stuffing them along with it, their attention, their love. So now when I started questioning what happened to me, I also reflected, okay, well, I don't want to make sure that they don't have that growing up. I want them to learn, okay, how do you feel? Pop, it's okay if you feel that way. Thank you for sharing that experience with me. Let me sit with you as we talk about that experience, man. That's more important to me than anything that could go out in that world. Being there for my 5-year-old still has his innocence, and oh my god, I so love it. He still has his imagination. He'll play with the Hot Wheels. We'll color. He has playtime to where he uses imagination to just create stories in his mind, and I love that. I love playing along with him. A year ago, I was dissociated. I was locked up in a room, and they were somewhere else. This year, I'm on a couch, and they're climbing over me like lion cubs over a lion, and I love that. And no other greater reward than that feeling that the love you're putting out there is getting in return on teams forward.
You mentioned that you're a partner, you mentioned that you're a father. These are two powerful and beautiful titles that anyone can have. When you share that story about you and your children, when you share that you're a father as well, when you speak of these things, how much, how powerful are the emotions behind each story, behind each title for you?
Um, that's a very good question. I don't think we've actually sat with ourselves enough to understand the power of each emotion behind. Because something that I've learned about my committee is that each part, each altar, and this is only true from my experience, and it's very important for us to understand that when we speak about DID, that we speak on it from our lived experience, not from textbooks, not from any research. It's just this is strictly from our lived experience. Our altars and our parts share memories and share different emotions behind those memories. So one event can have three different emotions, three different perspectives, three different. So when you say what emotions come behind those titles is not, it's really hard for us to depart or compartmentalize each one because now we walk as one, we share compassion for each one of us. And the one common thread, and I talk about this in my book, is calm as a superpower. Because when we're calm, clarity kind of sets into our head and we can all kind of foresee what's going on. Mm. But as a whole, our emotion as father is sacred. So that's like a 10 out of 10 always, even on the hard days. Because there's days where the term of endearment is cabron. I come from a Latin background, so my little 5-year-old, he's a little troublemaker, but I love him. So I call him my little cabron. Oye, cabron, stop it. But I love it because in return, when something happens, say I stub my toe on a bed, he's like, that's what you get, cabron. So I love that, so it's that reciprocation of it. So that, like I said, that's always a 10. Good days, bad days, regardless. Being a father, always at a 10.
You mentioned the word superpower. I associate that with people who leave imprints on our lives, good, bad, or indifferent, right? But mostly good for this conversation. And what I share is that there's going to be people that come into your life that mean so much to you. They've benefited your life so much, and you always remember them, even when they're gone, because they have a superpower, and that superpower is their most identifiable trait. So, for example, I say that about my grandmother. My grandmother, before she passed away, was her charity. She would always go out of her way to help people. That's why so many people in my family call her mama, even though they may be a niece, a nephew, a grandchild like me. That's what we called it because that was her superpower. When you now, as a parent, look back on your journey up until this point, what would you say your children's superpower is for you?
Good one. And it's my oldest. He has a very special name to us. His name is Fock. Um, we named him that because we always felt that he was a messenger. He was a messenger of love and compassion. And it's funny that we knew that before he was born because now that he's 11 years old, he still walks around like with such undeniable heart and compassion for everyone. It really is remarkable. I'm like, where the hell did he get so loving and kind from? Like, we know we were raised in chaos. Like, you're so pure and loving and kind. Like, it's so amazing. So his superpower is definitely compassion. My youngest one is imagination. That is something that we failed to do. We locked up. So to recognize that that's his imagination for music, his imagination for art, his imagination for self-expression is definitely a superpower. And the more we allow him to express that, the more joy we get from seeing him thrive in that imagination.
And Mike, what would you say your superpower is?
Calm. It is definitely calm these days. Understanding would be in close second. And I say that because the more calm I am, the more I let my breath kind of settle in, the more clarity and perspective I get. Like, how awesome is this that you're in Toronto, I'm in Las Vegas, and here we are sharing the moment. How amazing is that? How amazing is it that this message of empathy, of love, and compassion can have a ripple effect and transcend the both of us? Calm, understanding. That's our superpower.
I'm a big fan of the calm, even bigger fan of the peace. And I love that you listed that as a superpower because I think first thing that comes to for maybe a lot of men is strength, power, right? Things that you can show outwardly, but we're mentioning things that you have to dig a little bit deeper to find. And I think that is very unique because it shows that we're thinking beneath the surface. This is who I am. Get to know me outside of my experiences. Get to know Mike outside of his past experiences because it's a part of us, but it doesn't define us, right? Meaning that I do have an identity or identities that includes my journey, but it includes the journey. I have so many other parts to me. How were you able to identify some of the behaviors that helped you to find the calm, help you to find the understanding?
The calm and understanding came at a price. And that price was me sitting with myself. We did something that they told us or recommended not to do, which is we tried to speed up our healing process. And the way we did that was we sat in front of a laptop like we're doing now, except that we're looking at you, not the camera lens. When we actually sat with them, I had a list of questions that I had for my alters and my parts. And it became a ritual, a daily journal, a daily video journal, where I would sit in front of a laptop, ask a question, and allow my alter, my part to come through and explain. Sometimes it was hard because I would get a wave of memories that I didn't ask for. And with those wave of memories, the emotions came back. My body, like I said, your body remembers the trauma, man. So the more questions I asked and the more our past revealed itself to us, our body felt it. So much so that there was days where we had to skip the daily journals because we became so dissociated with reliving the traumatic event and again not learning how to process those emotions. Once we okay, it was almost like cleaning out the closet. Get all the take everything out. And when you look back, your room is completely nice. But now they have an empty closet. I'm like, all right, now I can actually start to sort things back in order. I can color code things. I can put the pants with pants, shirts with shirts. I can organize. That was a
I think you're on mute, Mike.
hear me now? So going back to calm and superpower, it wasn't until I learned how to figure out what was going on in that closet and how it was organized that I was able to stay calm and actually understand that as a superpower. So I had to actually clean out that closet, sit with myself, and then I'm like, all right, everything's clean. We're good now. Let's move forward. As a matter of fact, let's get a new wardrobe in this bitch. Sorry, I don't mean to cuss, but I was that excited. I'm like, man, it felt good. Yeah, it sucked. Getting all those memories, getting that body convulsion, letting my body relive those experiences. It sucked. I'm not gonna lie. It is hard. Grateful and thankful that we did it. I hope I give, and we did it. We did it, and I'm so thankful.
Nothing feels better than a good self hug, right?
For real, yo. For real, honestly, we failed to do that in 42 years. We do that a lot more often now.
What are then some of the ways that you celebrate yourself these days?
The way we celebrate ourselves is being true to ourselves. We will not abandon ourselves anymore. Um, and the way we do that is just showing up. We stay present. We I'm not sure if this conversation was recorded or not, but we talked about how when we wake up, we have to decide whether or not we have to do those mental exercises. That's a big step. So the way we honor ourselves moving forward is the very first thing that we do when we wake up is we recognize that we're blessed. Recognize we're waking up stronger than the version of us who fell asleep. Man, it's gonna be a great day today, regardless. Strength is not always strong, man. Strength is not always, man, going at it relentlessly and full forward and motivated. Sometimes strength is numbness. Sometimes strength is allowing yourself to just sit there and process your emotions and be okay with that. Allowing yourself to be human. Sometimes that's the strongest strength that you can have is allowing yourself to be human. And that's how we honor ourselves. We allow ourselves to be human and say, do we want to do these exercises today or not? And when we say no, all we have to do is because right now we're in a great place in life. Our partner and our boys have made it safe for us to just be ourselves. So every once in a while, when we say no, we're not going to do those mental exercises, we hear Johnny from across the room, Dad, you're glitching again. And that just means that, I'm not doing my mental exercises. So I love it. I really love life right now.
I meant to ask you this earlier, but just to clarify for those who may or may not truly understand some of the terms or even some of the language that you and I are using, can you clarify what committee and alters mean?
Yeah, sorry about that. Committee. In DID community, those of us who are diagnosed with DID name our systems, our adaptive survival systems. We've always kind of felt we had the ID, but because, like I said, we misdiagnosed, we've always had this. And that's because our partners are like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm talking to myself, just leave me alone. I'm talking to them. And so when I got diagnosed, I'm like, dude, that makes sense. We've been talking together. Like we were high fiving each other, like, what's up? So committee is the name I gave my system, my adaptive survival system, to make sense of my inner world. When I say parts and alters, that's a term that we use in the DID community to, for lack of a better term right now, different personalities are different fragmented parts. I just, I don't know, I still feel kind of a sting when I say split personality because that's not what we are. Is the mind fragmenting to allow us to process that emotion?
So I guess in a way for us or for myself and maybe many others to understand, um, it's components to you, right? Similar to like, let's say, and I don't mean to say it is this, but let's say like a car engine, how there's different parts to make the car go, right? Would that be similar?
Very similar. Um, a different metaphor that we use a lot is because we love to read. There's different chapters of us. Each part, each altar has a chapter, but we're all started with the same book. You're not going to change our story. We're still the same book, just different chapters. That's all.
Okay. That makes sense. That'll clarify because I know sometimes we can get deep into the terms and the language, and some people may think, "Oh, what's this? What's that?" Because we talked about it earlier, where depending on your medium of consumption, you can either do your research, like maybe me and many others would do, and say, "Okay, let me learn. Let me go to the psychiatry website. Let me understand this, understand that." You may hear from friends, and friends would be like, "Ah, you don't want to know about that." You may turn to movies and TVs like we talked about, right? Like we touched on the movie Split, for example. And when I asked you about that, you had a response. So without giving too much away, what would be your, for those who have seen the movie or for those who get their information primarily from that type of medium where it's TV and movies, Split. Is that a representation of DID, or is that something else, or is it something in the middle?
From my experience, in my opinion, that's Hollywood's version of DID. That's the depiction of harm and stigmatization that keeps isolating those of us who have DID. That stigma really does isolate. It really does silence, and it does create more harm than it does good. It doesn't hurt feelings. It hurts futures because what it does, it prolongs healing. It prolongs someone actually asking themselves, what happened to me to be this way? Movies like Split, who lean on that stigmatization that DID is chaos, that DID is dangerous, obviously is doing it for entertainment purposes. Is not something to be looked at for examples of. And I think that's what it's doing. It's providing examples of when it's really not. DID is an adaptive survival system. Dude, we learn how to survive because our system is built to protect us. And a lot of us get it before the age of 6. Now, think about that. Most of us have this before we even reach the first grade. So, how is it that teachers and staff and the community and society itself is able to actually cope with this, understand us, and if not for those movies that stigmatize that DID is dangerous and chaos. So when they see it or a split reaction or an over dramatization of a certain situation at hand, rather than question, okay, what happened to this person? Right away, their defense goes up. Like, oh man, this person's unstable. This person is dangerous. When in reality, that's when we should be having the most empathy for that person.
One thing I really liked about this conversation and the way you shared and convey your message is that you emphasize that is an adaptive survival system. It is there to protect you, not to punish. It is there to show you how to navigate in the world in a different way than maybe some other people do so. For those who aren't experiencing DID or who that is not their journey, such as myself and maybe so many others, how can we become an ally and strengthen our bond with you and your community?
Simple answer, be human, have some empathy. Um, During our journey, after we cross that entry journey of our healing, once we walk through it, so many resources and so many love and compassion messages came forward. It's almost like when you open the pressure valve and that first verse you have, yes, at first it's intense. You get the emotions, you get that, but after a while, you really do feel the shift go from pressure to peace. And once you make that shift and once you feel that freedom of peace, you live in that world. Now, in that world, we came across a YouTube video of a TED Talk that explains the difference between sympathy and empathy. And the difference, and it's so impactful that really that's the best way you can help anyone with DID. That's the best way to help any human with any mental disability. And if I can, I just want to make one thing clear. Mental health is something that we all have. Is just like the air we breathe, and just like as our heartbeat, we all have mental health. The only difference is some of us have it or can cope with it a lot better than others. Having that empathy for one another is there because we all have mental health. You just gotta turn up the knob of empathy a little louder on the universe.
I will always agree with that statement every day and twice on Sunday because I preach and practice the four pillars of health, which are emotional, mental, spiritual, and physical. Everyone knows the physical, because the physical is what we see. We talked about it, right? I am man, right? I am woman. Hear me roar. Let's flex our muscles. How many people understand the mental health or the emotional side? The spiritual, God, religion. Those two are probably the most popular and probably the most known. But you touched on something that's mental health. Like, how fit is your mental health wellness right now? Right? Some people say that terrain, today's a 75. Yesterday could have been 100. Tomorrow could be a 25, right? We all have it. The question that everyone should ask yourselves, what are you doing to strengthen it? And what you mentioned with DID is that there's a system there to strengthen it. I have a system to strengthen it. At the end of the day, some people call it survival system. Another person may call it boundaries. Another person may say that I'm going to separate myself from this crazy family member because every time I see their name on my phone, I get triggered. Right? We all have that person. But one thing that we should also remember is that we all have a way to soothe ourselves. And I think that is the biggest key. And Mike, I want to ask you one final question before I let you go, my friend. I want to give you three wishes. And just like Aladdin's genie lamp, you can wish for three things that you want people to know about this question. When it comes to the DID community, what are three things you wish people knew about their journey and why?
Thank you for such a great question. Thank you for asking it because we know it's a question you ask your guests. So we're kind of prepared for this one. And the first time I heard you ask it, I really had to stand and sit with myself and ask, like, dude, what would we wish for? Not money, not fame. I'm like, we don't want none of that. So what would we want for our community? So I think I just need one wish. And that'll be like, I want to take it back to when it was when I was a kid. And what I mean by that is when I was a kid, and someone pulled up in front of the apartments and honked, everyone would go to the window or crack the door open and see who the hell's honking. I want to pull up to my DID community and say, we are not broken. We were worth saving. And if our mind separated to protect us, we were worth saving to begin with. And that is why every time we wake up, we're stronger.